If you've listened to this program for a long time, you probably have heard about the Starchild Skull. Well, we're going to get an update from Lloyd Pye on this, on the DNA information, and then we're going to talk with him about some other incredible issues on Coast to Coast AM. Lloyd Pye, he joined the Army and became an agent for military intelligence, and during this time he began an independent study of human evolution. His studies led him to conclude that humans could not possibly have evolved on Earth according to the Darwinian paradigm. By age 40, he could illustrate his belief by comparing skeletons in the so-called pre-human fossil record with those reported to belong to the world's 4 basic types of hominoids. Lloyd is probably best known as the caretaker of the famous Starchild Skull, and here he is back on Coast to Coast. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hi, George. I'm fine, and I'm very happy to be with you again.
Always a pleasure. There's incredible times, Lloyd. You were last on with me in March, and just in these few months, man, the bottom has fallen out, huh?
Well, actually, it was March a year ago, so
yes.
It's been like 20 months since I've been on, actually.
Oil prices were high then.
Yeah.
So, what's new with the Starchild Project?
Well, we have a terrific announcement to make to everybody who's been following it for the 10 years that it's been going on. It'll be 10 years in February if anyone can believe
and
that.
And you better review the Starchild Project, too, because we've got lots of new listeners.
Okay. The Starchild is a real, true bone skull. It's not a crystal skull. It's not cobbled together. It's a real skull that, anybody can look at, and thousands of people have and can tell that it's real, but it's very unlike a human skull. It's got many, many really, really divergent qualities about it. The bone is half as thick as normal human bone. It weighs half as much, and yet it's 2 or 3 times as hard. And part of that hardness has to do with some fibers of some kind that are woven through the matrix of the bone. Now, a lot of people write me and say, well, wouldn't those fibers be Morgellons fibers? No, they're not. Morgellons fibers are visible to the eye, and they seem to be to come to the skin and organs, whereas these fibers are microscopic in size, and they're woven into the matrix of the bone itself. So it's like comparing apples and oranges. Plus, these fibers, for whatever they're constructed of, they're very durable because they frayed. The reason we found them is the tips of them frayed out while the bone was being cut by a Dremel blade. So they're just not found. These fibers are not found in any other known bone of any kind of species at all. So there's that. There's the size of the brain in the skull. It should be about 1,200 cubic centimeters. If this was a human, even with the shape of the head, it should be about 1,200 cubic centimeters. It's 1,600 cubic centimeters of brain packed into that head, and we don't really understand how that can be done. The thinness of the bone, it completely lacks sinuses. It has very shallow eye sockets, but that still doesn't account for all the extra brain in there. We really don't understand yet how that works. The knot that all human beings have in the back of their heads, if you reach around to your own head right now and go down to the lower rear part of it, you'll feel a knot there. Everybody has that. It's called the external occipital protuberance, or the inion. If you're a monkey, if you're a chimp, if you're a gorilla, if you have a neck attaching to a head, you've got that bump because it's a bracing point for big muscles that attach there. Starchild doesn't have that. It has a dent where that is a normal bump, and it's pretty clear that it's a well-built dent. It's perfect. And that's another thing. The Starchild, for as weird as it is, it's completely symmetrical. Its very, very shallow eye sockets have a complete redesign for the openings for the optic nerve.
It's not like a deformity. It's almost like the pieces all fit, like a puzzle.
The pieces do fit. That's exactly right, George. It's clearly not a deformity. One of the hallmarks of deformity is asymmetry, and one of the amazing aspects of the Starchild is how incredibly symmetrical it is, how symmetrical everything is about it. So what it means is its genes are telling it to grow this way that it has, and those genes are telling it to grow exactly different than humans. So this tells us that its whole genetic package is going to be different, and that's what's exciting about what's coming up, because we did work toward, for the early years of this project, we did work toward getting a DNA test. At first, there were only 6 labs in the world that could do the ancient DNA testing that the Starchild required, because it's 900 years old. Carbon-14 dating tests it out at 900 years old. So if anything is over 50 years, that's considered ancient DNA, and it requires a lot of very special testing.
And that's expensive.
Oh, and that was expensive. So we had to work for years to get to that point, but in 2003 we got there. Though at first, as I was saying, those 6 labs, none of them would touch it. So we had to wait for a few years until there were more labs doing that kind of work. And finally, we got one that was willing to do it. And so they did, and what they found in 2003, using primers, which was all the technology permitted at the time, was that the Starchild's mother was indeed a human being, and its father was not. It was clearly not a normal human being. And I have the photographs of the test results on your website so people can see how clear this is. The mitochondrial DNA was recovered very easily, but the and the human found with it as well. But the Starchild's nuclear DNA was not recovered in 6 attempts. So we know its mother was human. We know its father was not a typical human. But what we didn't know was how far away that it fell. Now, we were told in 2003, if you wait 3 to 5 years, there will be a test available that will allow the sequencing of the entire genome, and we will be able to tell you exactly how far this guy was from human. So we've just had to basically sit for 5 years. Here we are, 5 years later from 2003.
Let technology catch up to you.
Yep, exactly, and it has. But unfortunately, as that new technology came on board, it's vastly more expensive, $200,000 to do that testing. I know. So
just write a check, Lloyd.
Yeah, right. Write a check, exactly, $200,000. But it gives you what you need to prove what the Starchild is. Well, finally, here just recently, we've been contacted and are making a deal with a British major documentary outfit to make a 1-hour documentary on the Starchild, part of which is going to go over the history of what got us to this point, but they're going to follow through on and film the testing, the major aspects of the testing. And the documentary showing the results is going to be broadcast next year around the world. So it will start in England, and they have, because in order to pay for that bill, to pay for that humongous bill, they've had to bring in some partners, one of which is one of the major networks in the U.S. to show it here in the U.S. and Canada and around the world. So I'm here tonight to alert the community, the alternative community, you and everybody else, that we are now lining ourselves up in position to win our argument, and the Starchild can do it. And it's going to be the thing, I think, that's going to nail it down that alien life did exist on the Earth at least once 900 years ago, and the Starchild is going to be the proof.
That's amazing. Let's talk about the possibilities. First of all, the people of this time period and the indigenous people, they had a way, especially the Incans, to stretch the skull. Did they not?
Well, all people have the ability to bind bind skulls and reshape them. Yes, absolutely.
Now, here's the paradox, though, Lloyd. Let's make just an assumption for a moment that the Starchild is all human.
Right.
It has a bizarre-shaped head. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
And if his head was stretched for whatever things were going on in during that era, they might have been trying to copy, let's say, an extraterrestrial that was living with them at that time. That's a possibility, isn't it?
Well,
so that still tells you that there's been visitation here.
Right. Well, you would be more talking about, I think, the coneheads of Peru, which have those elongated heads.
Mm-hmm.
The Starchild's head is not elongated at all. It's merely flattened in its rear.
Is he
the
more
rear
like
part
a
of its
gray?
head, it's just flattened, but it's not flattened in the way you normally flatten a skull by pressing a board